A fortune teller once looked at a bald boy standing in the back of a crowd and told him he would be king. The boy laughed. He was 10 years old. He owned nothing except the clothes on his back and the trust of a hedge knight too tall for his own armor. He was the fourth son of a fourth son. There were 30 people ahead of him in the line of succession. The fortune teller said it anyway. "You will be king, and you will die in a hot fire." The boy stopped laughing. Welcome to Westeros Within, where we journey into forgotten ages, hidden legends, and ancient mysteries. This is Blood of the Dragon. Episode 15, Egg's Fate, when the Squire burned a kingdom. His name was Aegon Targaryen, the fifth of that name. But the world knew him as Egg. He had spent his childhood on the roads of Westeros, disguised as a commoner, travelling with a hedge knight named Ser Duncan the Tall. Together they had wandered from tourneys to taverns, sleeping in barns, eating when they could, fighting when they had to. Dunk was the biggest man in the Seven Kingdoms, and possibly the worst liar. Egg was a prince pretending to be a peasant, and he was better at the pretending than anyone expected. Those years on the road shaped him. He saw things no prince was supposed to see. He watched lords abuse their small folk. He watched justice bend to wealth. He watched good men die because they could not afford a horse or a suit of armor. And somewhere on those dusty roads, a boy who had been born in a castle decided that when he grew up, he would change the world. He was never supposed to be king, but death has a way of rewriting succession. His uncle Baelor Breakspear, the finest prince of his generation, was killed by his own brother in a trial of 7. His cousin Valar died of the Great Spring sickness. Another cousin followed. Then Aerion drank wildfire, believing it would turn him into a dragon. It did not, and then his father Maekar fell in battle. One by one, every man between Egg and the throne was removed, not by conspiracy, not by ambition, by the grinding, indifferent machinery of fate. In 233 AC, at a great council, the lords chose Aegon, the unlikely, they called him, the fourth son of a fourth son who had walked the roads as a beggar boy, who had never expected to sit the Iron Throne, who had spent more nights sleeping under hedgerows than in castles. He was crowned Aegon the Fifth, and from the first day, he fought for the people he had walked among. He tried to reform the realm. He pushed for laws that would protect the small folk, limits on lordly power, restrictions on the rights of nobles over their tenants, taxes on the wealthy to fund the poor. He continued the work Alysanne had started centuries before, when she had abolished the Lord's right of the first night. The Lords resisted. Every reform he proposed was blocked, delayed, watered down, or simply ignored. The great houses had not fought a dozen wars to preserve their power, only to surrender it to a king who felt sorry for peasants. They smiled at court and sharpened their knives in private. Egg needed leverage. He needed something that would make the lords afraid, something that would remind them who the Targaryens were and why they had ruled for 300 years. He needed dragons, but the dragons were dead. They had been dead for 80 years, since the last pitiful creature expired in the dragon pit. The eggs that remained were cold stone, unresponsive to every ritual, every prayer, every alchemist's trick. Egg had tried everything. Maesters told him it was impossible. Septons told him it was blasphemy. Alchemists promised and failed. Years passed. Decades. And somewhere in those decades, the kind boy who had wanted to help the small folk became a desperate king who could not accept that the power he needed was gone. His children did not help. He had arranged marriages for them, political alliances that would strengthen the throne and bind the great houses to his cause. His children refused. One by one, Prince Duncan, his eldest, married a commoner, Jenny of Oldstones, a strange girl who danced with the flowers and brought a woman called the Ghost of High Heart to court. A woods witch, a dreamer, a woman who told prophecies that made grown men uneasy. The Ghost of High Heart told the court that the prince that was promised would be born from the line of Aerys and Rhaegar. Aeg's youngest grandchildren. This prophecy consumed the family. It twisted the marriages, it reshaped the succession, and it drew Aeg deeper into the belief that dragons, prophecy, and fire were the answer to everything. By the time he was old, Aegon the Fifth had lost every political battle. His reforms were stalled. His children had defied him. His lords despised him. And the only thing he had left was a castle called Summerhall, a collection of dragon eggs, and a plan that smelled of wildfire. No one knows exactly what happened at Summerhall. That is the truth the histories cannot give us. The accounts are fragmentary. The pages in the white book that describe the event are damaged, burned, illegible in places. What survives is this. In the year 259 AC, King Aegon the Fifth gathered his family at Summerhall, the Targaryen summer palace in the Dornish marches. With him came pyromancers from King's Landing. With him came wildfire. With him came 7 dragon eggs, arranged in a pattern, surrounded by ritual and hope, and the last shred of faith that a king could bring back the fire that had made his family gods. They lit the fire, and the fire did not stop. The wildfire consumed the castle. It ate through stone and wood and flesh with the indifference that only magic turned loose can manage. The walls cracked, the towers fell, the halls that had held a century of laughter and music filled with screaming. King Aegon the Fifth died in the flames. Ser Duncan the Tall died in the flames. The boy and the knight, the squire and his protector, together at the beginning, on a dusty road outside Ashford, together at the end, in a burning castle that should never have been lit. Prince Duncan died too. Aeg's son, the one who had married Jenny of Oldstones, the one whose love had been the first crack in the dynasty's arranged order. Jenny lived. Some say she lost her mind. Some say she wandered the ruins of Summerhall for years, singing. And in the chaos, in the fire and the smoke and the collapsing walls, Princess Rhaegar went into labour. Her child was born that night, born amid salt and smoke, the old prophecy said. Born as a castle burned and a dynasty screamed and the last great Targaryen king turned to ash. They named the boy Rhaegar, Rhaegar Targaryen, the prince who would grow up obsessed with prophecy, the prince who would read about fire and destiny and salt and smoke and believe that he was the answer. The prince who would crown Lyanna Stark with blue roses at the tourney at Harrenhal and start a rebellion that would end the Targaryen dynasty forever. It all began here, in the fire, in a good king's desperate act, in the crying of a newborn pulled from the arms of a woman who had just watched her family burn. Aegon the Fifth wanted to change the world. He spent his life fighting for people who could not fight for themselves. And when the world refused to change, he turned to fire. The squire became a king. The king became a dreamer. The dreamer became ash. And from his ashes, a boy was born who would bring it all crashing down. So tell me this, was Summerhall a sacrifice that succeeded because Rhaegar was born amid salt and smoke and the prophecy lived? Or was it a tragedy of desperation where a good man broke because the world would not bend? Write it in the comments. And if you want to hear what came next, when the prince born from the fire grew up haunted by the words that killed his grandfather, when madness crept into the throne room, and when a young knight named Jaime had to choose between his oath and 500,000 lives, subscribe to Westeros Within and join me for the next chapter, because next time the Mad King rises and the realm will burn.